For this video, I want to ask a very simple question. How would it feel to know that you could go into any conversation with anybody whatsoever and know with 100% certainty that you could get them to access their own inner greatness? And when I talk about that, the grounding, kind of the theoretical grounding that I'm talking about, is what's often discussed in hypnosis, coaching, and NLP trainings, which is that trance is a naturally occurring phenomenon. It is something that people go into all the time, and that people already have all the resources that they need. You are not someone that's coming in as a hero, but what if you knew that you could come into any conversation with anyone, regardless of their problem, and know that you could be that guide to help direct them to their own inner resources, their inner greatness. And what if you could do this naturally, where you're not forcing somebody? One of the things that I ran up against early on in my own self-development, NLP, coaching, hypnosis trainings, is that I was so impressed by these techniques that I was learning that I wanted to kind of force the people that I knew and loved to go through the same transformations that I went through. So I tried hey, just close your eyes. Let me do this technique on you. And unsurprisingly, it didn't work that well. And it's not just that it doesn't work with random family members or friends, it also doesn't work that well with paid clients either. But that's a separate conversation. So what if you could be someone that allows people to tap into those resources without having to be this person that's always trying to force people to change? What if you could do it very naturally? What if it could all come up spontaneously? And how you do this is actually just through curiosity and then one secret from hypnosis. But let me just pause before we even get to the hypnosis element of it. The key element, I'd say at least 50%, if not more, is just curiosity. If you can become the person that is most curious, most fascinated, you see other people, to almost borrow Christian language from this. You see the image of God in them. You see something divine and beautiful in them. You recognize that there is something infinite and wonderful about the other person. And that leads to curiosity. And notice how curiosity is the opposite of trying to force something on someone. So instead of coming at them with these techniques, what if you led with an immense amount of curiosity? And that actually is the secret. Before it to work, you actually need to be able to tap into this idea of knowing when someone's response to anything, whether it's a question you ask or the way that they interact with something going on around them, is happening consciously or unconsciously. That's where some familiarity with hypnosis is essential to what I'm talking about here. So with conscious responses, those are the same story, the same program, the same resources someone lives their life by. It's autopilot. It's the same old thing. It's driving the same way to work every day, having the same conversations with the coworkers, driving home the same way, being in that same routine. Your brain has those grooves in it, and those are well-established grooves, well-established neuron patterns. Unconscious responses are those rare times where there is an openness to change. When you are accessing parts of your mind, you're thinking about things in a brand new way. And throughout a typical day, you're going to see my wonderful drawing skills here. Throughout a typical day, 99% of what you're doing is just conscious, and 1% perhaps is going to be unconscious. And so I represent this by having one red dot in here. It's actually kind of hard to see. But what happens if you just layer in curiosity? So throughout your day, typically, there might be one moment out of 100 where you might be able to accidentally tap into something that you haven't accessed for a while. Well, what about if you're in a conversation where someone is just intently curious about you and your problems or your dreams or your goals? Just think about the last time someone really truly sat down and just wanted to get to know you at the deepest level. Typically, you start to experience some of what we would call trance, some of what we would call hypnosis, just spontaneously things start popping up. And so when there are those moments where someone is giving you their undivided attention, and they're intently curious, something that happens is those unconscious responses start to come out a little bit more often. You'll notice in this beautiful drawing of mine that there's a little bit more red dots and they're a little bit bigger. But now, this is the magic of advanced spontaneous hypnosis. What if we directed that curiosity, we remained curious, and we directed that toward the unconscious response? So instead of just being curious about anything, which is what this slide represents, where you're just kind of curious about them overall, you might go here and there. What if you learned how to recognize when their responses were coming from the unconscious mind, and you got really curious about those? That is where there is what I call a hypnotic explosion. And what's so cool is that this is simultaneously doing two things. One, because you're drawing out and amplifying the unconscious mind, they're going into trance automatically. And second, if you know how to guide the conversation, that's actually doing the change work. It's actually doing the coaching for you. It's doing the healing work for you. So let me just go back to the beginning then. That initial question of how can you go into a conversation and know that you can help someone tap into their own greatness? Number one is through curiosity, but then second, it's knowing and noticing when someone's response is more conscious versus unconscious and placing that attention on the unconscious mind. And that just grows the moment and it all happens spontaneously. So I'm going to have a lot more videos explaining this. This is something that just came to my mind as far as a way to illustrate it. And I'm going to provide actual examples in future videos where I'm doing this with someone. But this is just to provide an initial framework so that when you see that in the future, you might be like, oh, okay, I understand what he's doing now.